In early 2011, the Arab Spring swept into Libya. Civilian protesters took to the streets, demanding an end to Muammar Gaddafi's authoritarian rule. When the regime responded with violent crackdowns, the civilian resistance looked exactly like a spontaneous, entirely disorganized grassroots rebellion. The international community moved with remarkable speed. By March 17th, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 1973, authorizing member states to establish a no-fly zone and take military action to protect civilians. But amidst the chaos of civilian protests and untrained volunteers, a highly organized military structure suddenly emerged to lead them. A seasoned combat general stepped in to professionalize the disorganized rebel forces. That commander was Khalifa Haftar. He hadn't risen from the streets of Benghazi, nor had he been living in Libya at all. When the fighting broke out, he flew in from suburban Virginia, where he had been living just a short drive from CIA headquarters. The 2011 revolution looked like a sudden democratic uprising. In reality, it was the execution of a 30-year covert CIA operation, fueled by old grudges, oil, and gold. The United States government's vendetta against Gaddafi escalated sharply in 1986. American intelligence intercepted messages proving the Libyan leader had directed a bombing at the Labelle nightclub in West Berlin, an attack that killed 2 U.S. soldiers and injured hundreds. President Ronald Reagan responded with Operation El Dorado Canyon. U.S. warplanes dropped bombs directly onto Gaddafi's military compounds and personal residence in Tripoli. The strikes leveled his tent, but Gaddafi survived unharmed. With direct military assassination attempts proving messy and politically restrictive, CIA Director William Casey pivoted. If the U.S. couldn't bomb Gaddafi out of power, the agency needed a clandestine proxy force to remove him from the inside. They found their solution sitting in a Chadian prison cell. Khalifa Haftar, a former top general in the Libyan army, had been captured alongside hundreds of his men and abandoned by Gaddafi. The CIA offered Haftar a deal: turn against his former boss, and American intelligence would arm and train his loyalists. When the government in Chad collapsed, the U.S. was forced to evacuate Haftar's new proxy army. An operation dubbed Magic Carpet bounced the 300 men from Chad to Nigeria, Zaire, and Kenya before flying them across the Atlantic to resettle in the United States. The CIA had successfully recruited and extracted a ready-made rebel force. For 2 decades, they warehoused this human weapon in the American suburbs, waiting for the right geopolitical spark to deploy it. By the 2000s, Gaddafi appeared to change his stance. He dismantled his weapons of mass destruction programs, paid billions in compensation for past terror attacks, and shook hands with Western leaders. Behind the diplomatic smiles, he was preparing a direct challenge to Western financial dominance. Gaddafi proposed the gold dinar, a pan-African currency backed by Libya's vast gold reserves, designed to replace the French-controlled CFA franc. Leaked emails from Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's private server later confirmed the anxiety this caused in Western capitals. The correspondence explicitly cited Gaddafi's 143 tons of gold and his plan to establish an independent African currency as primary motives for foreign intervention. When the Arab Spring reached Libya in 2011, it provided the perfect cover. As civilians protested in the streets, proxy nations like Qatar and Sudan quietly flooded the rebel forces with over 20,000 tons of heavy weapons. The operation culminated in October 2011. CIA ground operatives tracked Gaddafi fleeing the city of Sirte. They fed the coordinates to a U.S. Predator drone and French fighter jets, which locked onto his convoy and launched a devastating strike. Rebel fighters on the ground captured him moments later. By combining local civilian unrest with imported CIA commanders and NATO air power, Western intelligence agencies crafted the perfect illusion of a spontaneous revolution to mask a targeted assassination. This chart shows the immediate shift in control over Libya's primary resource, 1.6 million barrels of oil per day. Within weeks of the regime falling, foreign oil giants like Total, ENI, and BP rushed in to renegotiate highly favorable extraction contracts. Meanwhile, the 143 tons of state gold reserves that Gaddafi intended to use for a new African currency completely vanished. To this day, there is no official paper trail detailing where the gold ended up or who profited from it. Before the intervention, Libyan citizens enjoyed free healthcare, free education, and the highest GDP per capita in Africa. The new wealth flowing out of the country never replaced what was lost on the ground. The immediate outcome of Libya's liberation was the swift, absolute extraction of the nation's two most valuable financial resources by outside actors. This visualization highlights the sheer scale of the power vacuum left behind. In a country of only 6 million people, an estimated 20 million guns were suddenly in circulation. With Gaddafi gone, the various rebel factions and CIA-backed commanders refused to lay down their arms. They immediately turned on one another, fracturing into competing militias to fight for control over the lucrative oil ports. The country descended into a brutal, multi-sided civil war. This instability led directly to the attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, killing 4 Americans, and allowed human trafficking networks to establish open-air slave markets in the resulting chaos. When superpowers spend 30 years plotting to remove a dictator, but invest 0 days planning for the aftermath, the result is a demolition. The intervention in Libya exposes how humanitarian concern is routinely deployed as a convenient cloak for resource control.